I was tying my shoes when my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I almost didn't answer it. I had exactly 20 minutes to get across town before the notary's office closed for the day, and I'd already been running late since my coffee maker decided that Thursday afternoon was a good time to stop working entirely. I glanced at the screen expecting a spam call or maybe my neighbor Harold asking me to watch his dog again, but it was my accountant, Dennis. Dennis never called me on a Thursday afternoon. Dennis barely called me at all. Everything between us happened through email. Neat little spreadsheets, quarterly summaries. A phone call from Dennis in the middle of the day meant something was wrong. I picked up. "Richard," he said, and there was something in his voice I'd never heard before. A tightness, like a man choosing every word carefully before he let it out of his mouth. "Where are you right now?" I told him I was at home, about to leave. "Don't leave yet," he said. "Please. I need you to sit down for a minute." I sat down at my kitchen table, still holding one shoe in my hand. Outside, the afternoon light was cutting through the window at that angle I always liked, the one that made the whole room look golden and quiet. I remember thinking it was strange, how peaceful everything looked on the outside while Dennis's voice on the phone was doing something to my chest I couldn't quite name. "I've been going through the property documents you sent me last week," he said. "The ones for the house transfer." The house. My house. The one I'd lived in for 31 years, raised my son in, buried my wife from. The one I'd decided, after months of thinking it over, to sign over to my son Daniel and his wife before I got any older. It was the right thing to do, I had told myself. Estate planning, being responsible, not leaving a mess for anyone to sort through after I was gone. "There's a problem, Richard," Dennis said. He walked me through it slowly, the way you talk to someone when the news is bad enough that you have to be careful about the pace. About 8 months before this phone call, someone had filed paperwork using my name and my signature, or something close enough to my signature on a document that I had never seen, never signed, never agreed to. A home equity line of credit, $240,000 drawn against my house. The house I was about to sign over for free to my son. I sat at that kitchen table for a long time after Dennis finished talking. The shoe was still in my hand. My son Daniel was 41 years old. He worked in commercial real estate. He had a wife named Christine and a 9-year-old daughter named Lily, who was my whole heart on 2 legs. Lily called me every Sunday evening and told me about her week in that running, breathless way that children talk, jumping from her spelling test to a movie she'd watched, to a story about a bird that had flown into her classroom window. I lived for those Sunday calls. I would have done anything for that little girl. I had been planning to sign my house over to Daniel and Christine so that Lily would have something someday. That was the only reason. Not for Daniel, not for Christine, for Lily. Now I was sitting in my kitchen holding one shoe, and my accountant had just told me that my house already had $250,000 borrowed against it by someone who had forged my name. I put my shoe down on the floor. I didn't call Daniel right away. I want to be clear about that, because later some people would say I should have called him immediately, given him a chance to explain. But I had spent 63 years on this earth, and I knew something that you only learn from living long enough through enough hard things. When someone has done something they can't explain, they don't need you to give them a chance. They need time to build a story. And I wasn't interested in giving anyone time to build a story. I called my attorney instead. Her name was Margaret, and she had handled my wife's estate 6 years earlier with a precision and a kindness that I hadn't forgotten. I told her what Dennis had told me. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Richard, I need you to not sign anything today. Cancel the notary appointment." I canceled it. Over the next 4 days, Margaret and Dennis worked together and dug up things I hadn't known. The home equity line had been opened online, using scanned documents. The money had moved through an account I didn't recognize, a joint account in Daniel's name and Christine's name. The loan payments had been made on time, which was why I hadn't noticed anything unusual in my mail. Someone had been careful. Someone had thought this through. I want to tell you what those 4 days felt like, because I think it matters. I didn't sleep much. I ate cereal for dinner twice. I sat in the living room where my wife's photograph is still on the mantel, the one from our trip to Vermont in 1998, her laughing at something off camera, and I talked to her the way I've talked to her every day since she passed. I told her what was happening. I asked her what to do. She always looked so certain in that photograph, so lit up from inside, and I tried to borrow some of that certainty for myself. I kept thinking about Daniel as a little boy, bringing me drawings he'd made, asking me to watch him ride his bike without training wheels for the first time, standing next to me at his mother's funeral in a black suit that was slightly too big for him, trying so hard to hold himself together. I'd been so proud of him for that. I'd thought, even in all that grief, that I had done something right, that I had made something good. I kept trying to understand how we had gotten from that boy to this. On the 5th day, Margaret called me and gave me a clear picture of where things stood legally. What had been done was fraud. It was serious. If I chose to pursue it criminally, I could. She laid out every option without telling me what to do, which is why I trusted her. She said that before anything else, she strongly recommended I get a complete financial picture of my estate, because if this had happened with the house, it was worth checking whether anything else had been touched. Dennis spent another week on that. When he came back to me, the news was contained, at least it was only the house. But $240,000 borrowed against the only significant asset I had left was not a small thing. The original loan was still accruing interest, and I had been 3 days away from signing the deed over without knowing any of it existed. If Dennis hadn't called me that Thursday afternoon, I would have signed that house over to people who had already secretly borrowed against it. The debt would have transferred with the property. I would have given my son and his wife a house I thought was worth something, and I would have actually given them a house that was already deeply underwater, with my name still on the debt, and I would never have known. That thought sat with me for a long time. 2 weeks after Dennis's first call, I drove to Daniel's house. It was a Saturday morning in October, the kind of morning that New England does better than anywhere else. The sky that deep clean blue and the maple in their front yard gone completely red. Lily was in the yard when I pulled up. She ran toward me the way she always did, like the distance between us was an inconvenience she needed to eliminate as fast as possible, and I caught her and held on. Over her shoulder I could see Christine standing in the doorway watching us. Her expression was careful in a way that her expression had never been careful before, and I understood that she knew. Daniel probably knew I was coming. Margaret had sent a certified letter to both of them 3 days earlier. They had signed for it. I put Lily down and told her I needed to talk to her dad and mom for a little while, and that maybe she could go watch something inside. She looked at me with those eyes that children have, the ones that see more than they're supposed to see, and then she nodded and went inside without asking any questions. She'd always been wise for 9. We sat in their living room. Daniel looked like he hadn't been sleeping either. Christine sat with her arms crossed and her eyes on the floor. I didn't come with a speech. I hadn't prepared anything elaborate. I had driven there with 3 facts, and I put them on the table the way you put cards down. What was done, what it meant legally, and what I was prepared to do about it. Daniel started talking before I was finished. He said it had been a temporary decision, that they had planned to tell me. He said they had been drowning the investment deal that was supposed to change. Everything had collapsed. They had debts I didn't know about. They had panicked. He said the word temporary 4 or 5 times. He said he was going to pay it all back. He had a plan. He just needed a little more time. I let him finish. Then I asked him one question. I asked him whether the plan to pay it back had been made before or after Dennis called me. He didn't answer. Christine said that I was making this harder than it needed to be. She said families worked through things. She said that going to lawyers and making it into some kind of legal situation was what tore families apart, not what held them together. She said she hoped I would think about what this would do to Lily. I told Christine that I had been thinking about Lily since before Lily was born. I want to be honest about how I felt sitting in that room. It wasn't anger, mostly. Or it was anger underneath something else, something quieter and more permanent. I had spent my whole life building something I thought I could give to the people who came after me, and I had turned my back for one moment and someone had put their hand into it. Not a stranger. My son, the little boy who brought me drawings and asked me to watch him ride his bike. Grief is not just for the dead. That's something they don't tell you clearly enough. I told them both that I wasn't there to make decisions for them about their marriage or their finances or their future. I told them that my attorney had already begun the process to address the fraudulent loan, and that what happened next in terms of legal consequences would depend on a number of factors that were no longer entirely in my control. I told them that what was in my control was the house, and that the house would not be transferred to anyone under any circumstances until every dollar of that debt was cleared. Then I said the part that had been the hardest to figure out how to say. I told them that I wanted to be in Lily's life, that nothing about this changed how I felt about my granddaughter, that I would show up for every Sunday call and every school play and every ordinary Tuesday that she needed a grandfather for, and that nobody was going to take that from either of us. But I told them also that trust was not a thing I could manufacture on demand just because we shared a last name, and that what happened next between me and Daniel would depend entirely on what Daniel did next. Daniel didn't say anything. He was looking at the floor the way Christine had been looking at it when I arrived. I wondered what he was feeling. I wondered if any part of him was relieved. Sometimes people need to be caught before they can start coming back from where they've gone. I drove home. Lily called me that Sunday evening, right on schedule, like nothing had changed in her world. She told me about a book report she was working on, about a dog who walked across the whole country to find his family. She asked me if I thought dogs really understood loyalty, the way the book said, or whether they just followed the people who fed them. I told her I thought the best kind of loyalty was the kind that came from love, not need. That real loyalty meant choosing someone even when you didn't have to. She thought about that for a second. Then she said, "Like you always come to my birthday even when it's far away." I told her that was exactly right. In the months that followed, things moved slowly the way legal and financial things always do. Margaret worked through the documentation. Dennis helped build a paper trail that was clear and complete. The home equity line was eventually addressed through a negotiated resolution that Dennis and Margaret handled together. I won't go into every detail because some of it is still ongoing, but the key result was that the debt did not follow the house, and my name was clean. Daniel came to see me alone one evening in February. He stood in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd taken Dennis's call back in October, and he talked for a long time. Not explanations this time. He wasn't trying to make anything sound different than it was. He talked about the pressure he'd been under, the shame of not being able to tell me, the way one bad decision had led to a worse one and then to the worst one of all. He said he had always been afraid of disappointing me. He said he thought the loan was a way to solve the problem before I ever had to know about it. I told him that the thing he hadn't understood was that he had never needed to be anything other than honest with me. That if he had come to me 2 years ago and said, "Dad, I'm in trouble," I would have sat down at this table with him and we would have figured it out together. That there was nothing he could have told me that would have been worse than what silence had produced. He cried. My 41-year-old son sat in my kitchen and cried, and I let him, because some things need to come out before anything else can come in. I can't tell you that everything is fixed. That's not how real things work. Trust is slow, and the work Daniel has to do with me, with Christine, with himself, is the kind of work that takes years, not months. I don't know what their marriage looks like from the inside. I don't ask. What I know is that he calls me now, not just for the obligatory occasions, but on random evenings just to talk. It's small, but it's not nothing. Margaret helped me set up a trust for Lily. It's structured so that it goes directly to her when she turns 25, with no ability for anyone else to access or redirect it. She doesn't know about it. She won't know about it for a long time. It's not a large amount, I'm not a wealthy man, but it's enough to matter. Enough to give her some ground to stand on when she's old enough to need it. That's all I ever wanted. Not to leave a legacy with my name on a building somewhere. Just to make sure that little girl had something solid under her feet when the world started pushing back. I still have the photograph of my wife on the mantle. She's still laughing at something off camera, still certain in that way she always was. I still talk to her. I told her how things turned out, the long version, all the parts of it. I told her about Dennis's call and the kitchen table and the shoe I forgot to put on. I told her about October in Daniel's driveway and Lily running toward me across the red leaves. I told her about February in the kitchen and a grown man crying. She would have known what to say to Daniel. She always knew. She had this ability to reach into the complicated middle of a person and find the place where they were still trying, still reaching for something better, and she never let them feel ashamed for being found there. I'm still learning how to do that. After 63 years, I'm still learning. What I know for certain, The thing I would tell any man in my position is this. Loving your family and protecting yourself are not opposites. You can do both at the same time. You can hold the door open for someone who has hurt you and still make sure your house is locked. You can cry for the boy your son used to be and still call your attorney Monday morning. None of that makes you cold. None of that makes you a bad father. It just makes you a man who has been paying attention. The maple in Daniel's front yard will go red again this October. Lily will be 10 by then. She's already told me she wants to bake something for her birthday this year. Something complicated that requires my participation and at least 3 trips to the grocery store. I told her I would be there. I will be there. That's the one thing that has never been in question. Not for a single day through all of it. Whatever else was breaking apart or getting rebuilt, that one thing held. I was always going to be there.